the CMO, right, he or she is under even more pressure than ever, right, to justify why actually he is spending so much money and what is the ROI. And that's again why measurement is becoming so mission critical. It's almost kind of, you need to measure, and what you cannot measure almost doesn't exist. It's kind of irrelevant, right? If you can't measure what happens to your campaign, what's the point in running a campaign?
Recorded live from the sunshine of Miami Beach at the 4th Annual Possible Conference, this is Campaign Chemistry in partnership with PayPal Ads. CTV delivers attention, but proving it drives sales? That's still a challenge. PayPal thinks it has a fix. Its new curated ads offering connects ad exposure to actual purchase data, aiming to bring real accountability to CTV and the open web. Today, I'm joined by Dr. Mark Grether, SVP and General Manager at PayPal Ads, to unpack what problem this solves and whether it could change how marketers measure growth. I'm Cecilia Garzella, and this is Campaign Chemistry. Dr. Grether, welcome to the podcast and welcome to Miami. You're no stranger to Florida either, right? Because you got your master's.
Exactly. I was in Gainesville for some time, but it's long ago. It was in 1995.
Oh, not that long ago.
Come on, 30 years, right?
Yeah. Tell me about kind of what fond memories you have from that time period, not just at the school, but just in general,
Florida. I mean, it was for me, obviously, the first time, right? Kind of leaving Germany, being on my own.
How was that? Yeah.
It really helped me to, on the one, I would say, mature, right? But also, and I think that was even more importantly, appreciate that it's not about just theory. Universities in Germany are quite theoretical in nature.
Right? They're known for that, yeah.
And in the US, it was much more hands-on. And the case studies I really enjoyed. So I remember that we did a case study about ostriches.
Oh, ostriches.
Yes. And the meat quality of ostriches and how to basically then, create a marketing campaign about selling ostriches steak.
Wow.
Versus kind of, anything else, right? And it was really fun. It was just a fun time to kind of combine what I've learned theoretically in Germany with just the use case approach of the US. It was fun. It was a good time.
Yeah, no, you must have been kind of a culture shock, I can imagine at first.
It was a culture shock, but more because I was too young. Right? At the time, I was something like 22 in an MBA program.
Wow, that's
and everyone
impressive,
else was in their early 30s.
Yeah.
Some of my US colleagues have already had kids, right?
Yeah.
Married kids. And I was kind of 22. It was kind of a little bit an outlier. But nevertheless, I really must say I enjoyed it. And in hindsight, I wished I would have had more interactions with non-MBA students. We were a little bit on an island on campus. And that was one fun story. I can need to tell you. I was playing soccer in Germany, right?
Okay, very popular, yes.
And so I called the soccer team at the university whether I could do a tryout and eventually become part of the soccer team, right? And the response was, well, are you asking for your girlfriend? I mean, what do you mean? Well, we only have a female soccer team.
Okay, they must have been confused.
And there's no male soccer team at the University of Florida,
which is crazy. Now, soccer is so popular.
Exactly. Now, my two boys now, we are living now in New York for 15 years. They all play soccer. Everyone plays soccer, right? But again, 1995. Yeah. And I couldn't believe, what do you mean there's no male soccer team? No, it's only females. So it was really kind of a fun story that I remember.
Well, the times have changed. We got World Cup now in the States. So
very exciting. Yeah.
We're here in Miami. This is my first possible. I know this is your fourth.
My fourth, yeah.
So kind of what's different this year, or kind of what are your impressions so far?
I mean, the big difference is that it has really grown, right? I think every year it almost feels like it doubled in size, right? It was just in the Fontainebleau, now Fontainebleau and the Eden Rock. And so I do think it really still means that as much as we talk about data and AI, at the end is still humans who want to interact with each other.
Yeah.
And it's the relationships that matter. And coming together here in Miami is just kind of a testimonial of how important it is to know each other, to have the relationships, to have kind of conversations, not just in front of Teams or Zoom, but in person. And I think the power of that, I think people just underestimate.
Yeah, that's what I took away too, is like so much about this industry is just like the people. We're very social people, but I mean, you can't pass any kind of activation or cabana without seeing some kind of AI powered CTV, measurement ROI. One of the sessions earlier today, I think, was literally titled, Stop Defending Your Budget, How CMOs Can Lead the CFO Conversation. So obviously that's one of kind of the hottest topics in marketing, and largely what we'll be talking about today with kind of the exciting curated ads news that PayPal has. But first, before we talk about that, I kind of want to go back in time a bit to just give our listeners a quick catch up on what you and the PayPal ads team have been up to for the last 2 years. It's been a busy 2 years. You started kind of May 2024?
Exactly. Started May 2024. So it's almost now 2 years, right?
Yeah.
And so our journey was, and it's kind of, I would say, typical for any journey when you're building a new business. The first step is you need to basically have a vision and strategy for what the business is all about. And I think it's really important that the advertising business here at PayPal is not just a profit engine as a retail media business. It is actually a mechanism to make the flywheel of PayPal Inc. running faster, right? So we need to basically become an accelerator of the core business and not just a nice kind of small profit engine on the side. So that was kind of the first step. The second step is then it's about building the products. And then the third step is you need to be out and around, like here at the conference, right? To spread a word about a product that we have launched. And then it's about scaling the business and operating the business. Now, if you now dive deeper into the products which we have actually launched, it is the advertising business that sits on top of what we call our transaction graph. So the data that we have across the 400 million users of PayPal, 30 million merchants of PayPal. So we are sitting really across all the merchants, right? Not just having transaction data from one single merchant, but across all of them. We have the Venmo data.
Because we're in the Venmo suite right now.
Yeah, exactly. Right? You may have paid for whatever, your pizza or your Uber, right? You're sharing it with your friends. So we have the data from these transactions, and we have then obviously Honey, which is a browser extension. So we see where you're browsing on the web, right? And so we put all of that into the transaction graph. And that again is basically the backbone of the products we've built on top. On top of that, we have on the one hand now advertising opportunities on the PayPal app, on the Venmo app, and obviously on Honey. And then we have expanded it into what we call offsite. And on the offsite piece, we have a couple of kind of variations. The first one is that we have now curated ads, right? Where we do work with partners like Warner Bros. And other streaming companies to basically enable them to provide closed loop attribution back to the advertisers. Yeah, meaning you're running a campaign on Warner, right? And then wherever the transaction happens on any merchant, we see that and then can tie it back to the CTV campaign, and that enables now Warner and us to provide closed loop attribution and full funnel marketing back to the advertisers. So that's basically one of the things that we've launched offsite. That being said, what I'm really, really excited about is the launch of storefront ads.
Yes, the shoppable ads, right?
Shoppable ads, exactly.
That was last year?
We launched it last year, and we put a spin on it actually today.
Oh, exciting.
With the launch of what we call our identity, our PayPal identity. Yeah. So we are now making basically the PayPal identity available as an infrastructure play to the industry. So companies like Magnite and PubMatic and Taboola and Rocked and others are participating in getting access to our identity graph. And the cool thing about the identity graph is it is actually not based on cookies or IP addresses or whatnot, but it's really based on the identity that we have from payments. Yeah. And as you can imagine, we need to know that Cecilia actually has made a payment, not her twin sister. It's actually her, right? And so the identity has a much higher level of fidelity compared to what you would typically use in advertising. So making that available is key. And then on top of that, as you mentioned, we have now a shoppable ad unit, which enables now a consumer to actually make a transaction in the creative itself. And the question is now, why is that so kind of important for our advertisers and our merchants? The reason is at the end AI. Yeah, because of AI, there are fewer and fewer people coming to merchant websites. So the merchants now need to go where the consumers are. They're still on the open web. They're still on the Warners of the world. They're in LLMs in the future. And so you need to basically turn every touch point that you have as a consumer into a shoppable moment so that you can actually really kind of sell your products. And that's what shoppable ads is enabling merchants to do, turning kind of any interaction, open web, in CTV, in LLMs into a buying moment.
I mean, this is a big deal. I kind of want to pause on it because for so long, again, I mentioned all the talk about ROI earlier and incrementality. Advertisers, we were never able to really prove these things definitively, right? With kind of first party purchase data, but that's kind of what you all are offering here, right?
Exactly. And I think that the difference between what we do versus what's available in the industry is, on the one hand, as I mentioned, identity, but more importantly, it's the fact that we see it across all the merchants, right? Imagine that you are the CFO of a sneaker company, right? And the question is, how much money should I actually invest into marketing? How much money as a CFO should I allot to my CMO? And the answer is, okay, what's my market share today, and how is my market share going to grow? And that is a question of how many sneakers can I sell across all the merchants that actually have my sneakers in stock, right?
Yeah.
And we know that because we're sitting across all the merchants. A single merchant only knows what happens on his shelves, but they have no idea what happens on competing merchant shelves. We know that, right?
Horizontal, yeah.
We have, exactly. We have this horizontal view. We are the only ones who actually have the horizontal view based on transaction data, not just on lookalikes or whatnot, right? And so we can provide that horizontal view back to the CFO to help him to determine what's the market share, how's the market share going to change, and therefore defining how much money to spend and what's the budget that he should then give to the CMO.
Yeah.
And then to your point, the CMO is then getting this budget from the CFO. He is now asking, okay, where best to allocate the budget, where to spend the money, right? On which publishers, right? And that's where, as you mentioned earlier, incrementality comes into play, which is the one which has the highest incrementality, which again, as we sit horizontally, we can compare incrementality between merchants, and we can advise the CMO where the money is best allocated.
Yeah, no, it's an exciting offering. And like you mentioned earlier, it's kind of building off of those past features that you guys have been launching over the last 2 years with offsite ads, shoppable ads. Tell me, with the PayPal Ads Manager for the SMBs, is that still kind of rolling out, or what's the status of that?
Yeah, we are rolling it out. And maybe just recap the idea of the PayPal Ads Manager is basically to enable SMBs, and we have in the US 10 million on our platform, right? To enable them to get access to commerce media dollars. Yeah. And enabling them to basically generating a revenue stream by making their inventory, their eyeballs, purchasable in the form of ads. Yeah? As you can imagine, every single SMB couldn't do that themselves.
Right.
But as we are aggregating the inventory across the 10 million merchants, then you suddenly become, as a network, large enough for an advertiser to be interested in. And that's how we're helping our SMBs to get access to this stream of money, and for advertisers to have access to proprietary inventory, which before wasn't available at all.
Right, and it's making it more accessible to those kind of mom and pop shops.
Exactly.
So that's awesome. Going back to kind of CTV, let's talk a bit about why is it still so hard for marketers to even know, if whether those ads actually worked, even though CTV is such kind of a premium, channel, what's still the limitations there?
I think the biggest limitation is still measurement, right?
Yeah.
I mean, you run your CTV campaign, and then what happens, right?
Exactly.
And the one thing that happens is that people still do not buy in front of the TV.
Right.
Right? They buy later in a store, online, whatever it may be, right? And the question is, how do you connect the dots here?
Close
right?
the loop, yeah.
How do you close the loop, right? And that's where a few players who have both premium inventory on the CTV side as well as shopping destinations, they can do so. But most of them have either one or the other, but they don't have both, right? And that's again where we can come into play with our transaction data. We can connect now the CTV players on the one hand with our transaction data on the other hand to then basically stitch it together horizontally across all the merchants. And by doing so, enabling to provide closed loop attribution back to them as CTV providers and to their advertisers.
Yeah, and talk to me about what kind of makes a purchase signal kind of more of a reliable, more useful signal than the ones that advertisers are kind of traditionally used to working with.
Yeah, traditionally, right, it is maybe based on a small cohort of people, and then you do fancy lookalike models, right? It might be based on cookies or IP addresses, and it's maybe you, or maybe it's your sister, or your whatever, your mom, right? Who knows? No one really knows, right? But it makes a difference whether it's you or your mom who is making a purchase at home, right? And so that's exactly where we come in, because of the payment identities that we have, we exactly know who is actually making the purchase, and we can connect the purchase to the actual consumption of the CTV content. And that's kind of the magic that we can provide here by kind of bringing those kind of two worlds together at an identity level that hasn't been available previously.
That's with the PayPal Ads ID, right?
Exactly.
Yeah, nice. And so kind of walk me through what a real campaign would look like for a brand from kind of start to finish, from the audience creation to kind of the measurement. Yeah.
So the starting point is you would use our transaction graph to identify the audiences based on real transaction data across all the merchants. And based on that, you then eventually would like to do a conquesting strategy, let's say, right? And then we can help you to identify the audience that you actually would like to target, right? You are then empowered to reach exactly these users on a big CTV stream, show them, campaign, maybe an awareness campaign, and then later on, these consumers may then make a purchase anywhere on the web or in the LM environment, wherever it may be. Most likely, they are going to pay with PayPal, right? So we have the transaction data. And then we can tie it back together to the exposure of the ad. What we can also do, coming back to storefront ads, we can, if we like to, we can also now include the shoppability into the ad itself, right? In CTV, maybe not that you're doing it that often, but there is a possibility if the client chooses so to include that. Typically, we see that shoppable ads significantly improving performance of the open web. But you could also do the same in a CTV
like
environment.
A QR code maybe is typically?
For example, yeah. But again, the
sense.
technicality is there, right? So we could do that.
Oh, that's exciting, yeah. And so kind of why does this matter in the real world for a CMO kind of who, like you said, needs to justify ad spend in their company or to CFO?
Yeah, as we discussed earlier, I think that the CMO, right, he or she is under even more pressure than ever, right, to justify why actually he is spending so much money and what is the ROI. Yeah. And that's again why measurement is becoming so mission critical. And it's almost kind of, you need to measure, and what you cannot measure almost doesn't exist. It's kind of irrelevant, right? If you can't measure what happens to your campaign, what's the point in running a campaign?
Yeah, you need to be able to prove that it led to sales. Yeah,
exactly. And if it doesn't, then why are you doing it? Right?
Yeah.
And so the CMOs again under heavy pressure, they need to then look into partners like us who can then provide those proof points at the level of kind of precision that the CFO can't challenge.
Yes, exactly. I'm curious too, because I believe you got your PhD, right? Kind of in e-commerce and the internet and all that. It kind of feels like the lines between payments and commerce and advertising are just blurring more and more. Is that kind of the bigger story here? What are your thoughts on where things are going?
I think there are a couple of things. To the first point, I think you're absolutely right that payments and commerce and all of that, the lines indeed are kind of blurring. As we mentioned, we are now using our payment rails for shoppability, right? We're using our payment rails for identity. These are two examples where lines are indeed blurring, right? But what's also blurring is that as much as I'm at PayPal Ads, I'm a seller of media.
Yeah.
PayPal is also a buyer of media.
Yeah.
Which means we're having more and more conversation where I'm not just pitching as a seller, but I'm also sitting at a table as an advertiser. And that actually creates a very different dynamic in conversations where we basically now have partners talking to each other, selling and buying from each other.
Yeah, it's kind of very meta, isn't it? Yeah.
But it's in a good way, right?
In
because
a good way.
There's a lot of win-win.
Yeah.
As opposed to I'm just pitching to you and hopefully my story resonates better than another story that you got pitched to 5 minutes ago, right?
Yeah.
And so what's interesting is that now the CMO role in many cases, who typically was a cost center, spending media and then having to justify the media spent, actually is becoming a profit center, right? Where on the one hand, he still is spending media dollars, yes, but at the same time, he's also now eventually in charge of the retail media business where profits gets generated.
Yeah.
And eventually the profits from retail media actually are larger than the cost of media. And that now changes the role of the CMO fundamentally, because now he needs to be a commercially minded P&L owner, as opposed to just a cost center who has to justify to his CFO why he's spending so much money. Right. So on the one hand, we talk a lot about the challenges of the CMO in the world of data and AI, right? How basically that changes the role of the CMO. But on the other hand, I also do feel that the role of the CMO is also changing because he becomes in the future a true GM, a P&L owner, which hasn't been in the past the case.
Yeah, and I think it's kind of a good thing overall, right, for accountability at the end of the day.
Absolutely.
Yeah. What other trends do you kind of see in this space, like in the next, let's say in the next year or two, if we can even go that?
Yeah. I mean, everyone talks about, obviously it talks about AI, right?
Yeah.
And it looks like as if tomorrow we are not buying anything ourselves anymore, but our agents do.
Yeah.
Right. Let's see whether or not that's happening. But what's interesting is in whether it's us buying in LLMs or agents buying on our behalf, trust is becoming again very important. Right. How do you trust your agent to make purchases on your behalf? Yeah. And if you remember, PayPal became big because of consumers trusted PayPal in making payments when they, for the very first time, actually paid something online. Yeah. So it was always about trust. And now as we now look into the future, as agents now make purchases on our behalf, it's again trust, which is important. And so we feel that the value proposition of PayPal in this agentic environment, providing consumers the trust needed to be okay that the agent is making a payment on your behalf, is something which I think will become very, very important in the near future.
And you all have that reputation already, so.
And we have the global scale,
exactly.
Right? And we also have the proprietary data, right?
Yeah.
To inform the agents that they make the right purchases on my behalf, right?
Yeah.
So in that sense, we have the trust, we have the data. So I feel very optimistic about the kind of the agents buying on behalf, leveraging PayPal as a trust and as a data kind of vehicle.
We're in good hands here. Yeah. Well, thank you, Dr. Grother. This is a great conversation.
Thank you so much.
It was a pleasure.
Thank you.